Do you have perfectionist tendencies? Well, you may say, probably not. I've handled that already. I know that I used to have it, but let's take a look at that because perfectionist tendencies can be quite subtle. And I know for myself, I have worked a lot on this area. Typically, when this perfectionist tendencies seem to turn on for me, I notice it when I'm trying to get better in an area or do something for the first time. It subtly creeps upon me before I even realize that, oh, it's back again. Hello, there you are. So let's talk about perfectionism, how to recognize if you've got those tendencies, and then what the optimum way to be is to handle this. So, perfectionist is basically someone who, when they start to do something or as they're trying to get better in an area, they really don't have a sense of gradient, if you will. The mentality is it's all or nothing. It has to be the very, very best. And I know for myself, when I start trying to practice and improve in an area, whoo, that is when she shows up. Okay. Even though I've worked on it a lot. And it's really, what happens if you get caught up in that trap, you end up not having a finished product. Okay. It usually you end up with a lot of incompletes or your stats are kind of low. What you want to do is go for optimum. Optimum is not perfection, okay? And to get to optimum from the starting point, which may be at 0, if you're starting in a brand new area, all the way up to optimum, is done in gradients. That's how you win. That's how you run a positive process on yourself. So let's look at the definition of optimum. It may surprise you. Optimum is not perfection or an absolute. It is a gradient of betterment or improvement in an area. To help a being do more good than harm is optimizing a being. That's pretty positive, and that came from Alan Walker's definition out of the Knowledgeism Dictionary. So if you're starting out in a brand new area, or you're looking in an area that used to be optimum, but now with certain changes, maybe in technology, primarily technology, you need to revamp it, totally redo it, and take it from being maybe obsolete back into the optimum area. You want to do it gradiently. And one thing we stress here, and I know you all have heard me talk about this quite often, is acknowledging your wins. So when you start out to improve and make an area better, you're going for optimum. And along the way, there's going to be a lot of wins. So that's why it's one of the reasons it's so important to acknowledge your wins, because each step you're making an area better. That's a win versus having an all or nothing mentality. I know I was working with someone recently, and they actually was trying to, get what the optimum would be. And when we reached into that area to look at, they didn't even have a vision of what optimum would be. And I didn't realize it at that moment at first, but what had happened was their all or nothing mentality had switched on. They were sitting in the all or nothing think, if you will, which belongs to Miss Perfectionist. And so they weren't even able to get how the optimum scenario would look, what that optimum scene would be like. And so they couldn't even think in the area. And then I'm like, oh, that's what happened for that person. They slipped over into that perfectionist way of being, if you will, that perfectionism. So let's take a look at the definition of optimum scene and optimum scenario. So when you ask someone to give you the optimum scene on something, the optimum scenario on something, or the optimum vision on something, you are actually asking them to give you their gradients, because optimum doesn't mean perfect. And let me pause here. What you feel may be perfect for you is not what I would feel necessarily that would be perfect for you. And so if you're trying to manifest or trying to give a person the perfect world, if you will, you better be very, very clear on what a perfect world is for that person. It goes back to wants, right? If you understand fully the optimum scene and optimum scenario, that will make it possible for you to work with that person and then do your best to do optimum. It's done in gradients. You know, when I was kind of looking over my life to see where did I start having trouble with doing things perfectly, and it wasn't in my home. It was not in my home at all, although there was some of that. It actually started when I went to school. Because let's face it, sometimes when you don't give the right answer, you're kind of laughed at a lot of times, or maybe you're made fun of, or maybe people think you're weird. So, you know, and those things are usually quite painful unless you're really, really highly skilled in being able to just let that stuff roll off your back, be okay with it, laugh at it yourself, and if you're not able to do that, which I never was, because I didn't want to experience that stuff from the other kids on giving wrong answers or not understanding or maybe not being able to comprehend a math problem, and then you ask and then you still don't get it, then maybe you look dumb. Well, you know, a way to try to handle that is by doing it perfectly. Well, that is such a sabotage. So optimum scene, optimum scenario is done in gradient. That's how you get to optimum. If you're going out to practice in a sport, and let's say you keep messing up, one of the things I learned for Alan is, let's say you're trying to learn how to kick the soccer ball and you just cannot get it right, okay? You just can't get it right. Well, the way to handle that, instead of trying to do it perfect, is go out there and do it wrongly, incorrectly, just mess it up on purpose over and over and over again, and then practice doing it optimally, gradiently, and each time recognizing your improvement. Go for optimum, and life will be more optimum. Thanks, and see you next week.